The deputy sheriff was a young man, barely 23, with a face that hadn't yet learned the map of true cruelty. He sat in the swivel chair of the quiet station in Terrell County, the air conditioner humming a low, rattling tune against the relentless Texas heat outside. He had a prisoner, a tall man, a man with dark hair cut in a strange bowl-like shape that looked out of time, out of place. A man who sat on the floor, handcuffed, staring at nothing with eyes that seemed to swallow the fluorescent light. The deputy picked up the phone. He dialed the sheriff, Ed Tom Bell. He wanted to brag a little, just a little. "Sheriff, I got him," the deputy said, a grin touching his lips. "Stopped him for a traffic violation. Found a device on him, like an oxygen tank for emphysema victims, but he ain't got no tube, just a hose. And he's got this quiet about him." "You be careful, Lamar," the sheriff's voice crackled over the line. "I'm coming over. Don't you go in that cell with him." "He's under control, Sheriff. Just sitting there." The deputy hung up. He looked at the man, Anton Chigurh. The name wasn't on any ID because the man didn't have any. He was a ghost in denim. The deputy stood up. He walked over to the prisoner. He wanted to see the eyes again. He wanted to understand what he had caught. He didn't know that he hadn't caught a man. He had caught a plague. Chigurh moved. It wasn't a sudden jerk. It was fluid, like oil sliding across glass. He stood up, his back to the deputy. He stepped over the chain of his handcuffs. It was a move that required the flexibility of a gymnast and the indifference to pain of a corpse. His arms were now in front of him, but the chain was behind the deputy's neck. The deputy gasped, a wet, choking sound. Chigurh cinched the chain tight. He dropped his weight, pulling the deputy backward, over his own back, hoisting him like a sack of feed. They fell to the floor. The deputy thrashed. His boots, cheap cowboy boots, bought on sale in Odessa, scuffed frantically against the linoleum. Squeak, scuff, squeak. A pathetic rhythm of dying. Chigurh didn't grunt. He didn't breathe hard. He simply held the chain. He watched the deputy's face turn red, then purple. He watched the capillaries in the eyes burst, turning the whites into pools of red ink. The deputy's hands clawed at Chigurh's arms, tearing skin, drawing blood, but Chigurh didn't flinch. He was a statue made of bone and intent. The carotid artery gave way with a sound that was felt rather than heard, a soft, internal pop. The deputy's struggles ceased. His legs twitched once, twice, and then settled into the stillness of meat. Chigurh stood up. He unwound the chain. He looked at his wrists. They were bruised, bleeding slightly. He went to the sink. He washed his hands. He washed the blood off the chain. He dried himself with a paper towel. Then he walked to the deputy's desk, picked up the keys, and unlocked the cuffs. He picked up the device, the cattle gun, a captive bolt pistol, a slaughterhouse tool meant to stun cows before the knife. He walked out the door. The sun hit him like a physical blow. The Texas sky was a vast, indifferent blue dome. On the highway, a Ford sedan slowed down. An old man was driving. He saw a police car's lights, saw a man standing by the road. He was a good citizen. He stopped. "Need some help, officer?" the old man asked, rolling down the window. Chigurh leaned in. He placed the nozzle of the tank against the man's forehead. The old man blinked, confused. "Step out of the car, please," Chigurh said. His voice was like grinding stones. "What's that for?"
Chigurh pulled the trigger. Pfft! There was no bang, just the sound of air being released and the sound of bone giving way. The bolt shot out, punched a neat, round hole through the man's frontal lobe, and retracted instantly. The old man slumped forward, dead before his brain could register the intrusion.
Chigurh opened the door. He dragged the body out and left it in the ditch among the dry sagebrush and the rattlesnakes. He got in the car. He adjusted the mirror. He didn't look at the blood on the seat. He just drove. Llewellyn Moss was a welder by trade, a hunter by inclination, and a Vietnam veteran by necessity. He knew about death. He knew how it smelled. He knew how it waited. He was in the caldera, a volcanic bowl of rock and scrub south of Sanderson. He was hunting pronghorn antelope. The heat was ferocious, a living thing that shimmered off the hardpan ground, turning the horizon into a watery blur. He lay on the ridge, his heavy rifle resting on a rock. Through the scope, he watched the herd. They were skittish, nervous. Something wasn't right. They weren't looking at him. They were looking down into the basin. Moss lowered the rifle. He adjusted his hat. He looked where the animals were looking. Down in the flats, about a mile away, 3 vehicles were parked in a rough triangle. Dark SUVs, Broncos. They weren't moving. Nothing was moving. "What in the hell?" Moss whispered. He waited. He watched for an hour. The sun beat down on his back, soaking his shirt with sweat. No movement. Just the black shapes of the trucks and the brown shape of the desert. He began to walk down. He moved carefully, stepping on rocks to avoid leaving tracks, checking the wind. Old habits. In the jungle, a mistake meant a bouncing Betty or a sniper. Here, it meant, well, he didn't know what it meant yet, but he knew it wasn't a church picnic. He smelled it before he saw it. The smell of copper. The smell of bowels released in death. The smell of flies. He reached the first truck, a Ford Bronco. The door was open. A man was sitting in the driver's seat, or what was left of him. The windshield was shattered outward, shotgun blast, close range. The man's head was gone, replaced by a wet, red, abstract painting on the seat rest. Moss circled the scene. It was a slaughterhouse. Mexican nationals. Drug runners. Bodies were scattered like rag dolls thrown by a tantrum-throwing giant. There was a dead dog, a large black fighting dog, lying on its side, covered in flies. "Jesus," Moss muttered. He found another man. This one was alive, barely. He was slumped against the tire of a truck, clutching his stomach. His skin was the color of old parchment. His lips were cracked and bleeding. "Agua," the man rasped. "Por favor, agua." Moss looked at him. He didn't have any water. He had left his jug up on the ridge. "I ain't got no water," Moss said. "You speak English?" "Agua," the man whispered again. His eyes were glazing over. Moss looked around. He saw guns, Uzis, Remington shotguns, shiny nickel-plated pistols. He didn't touch them. He saw the heroin, a truck bed full of bricks wrapped in brown tape, millions of dollars of product cooking in the sun. But where was the money? Drug deals go wrong for 2 reasons: bad product or missing money. The product was here. Moss tracked the footprints. One set of boots led away from the carnage, heading toward the rocks. "Last man standing," Moss said to the dead dog. He followed the trail. It led up the incline toward the shade of a small overhang. And there he was, the last man. He was sitting in the shade, dead as a doornail. He had been shot in the gut, probably bled out trying to count his winnings. Beside him was a leather satchel, heavy, expensive. Moss picked it up. He opened it. The world seemed to stop spinning for a second. It was full. Bricks of $100 bills, bank wrappers, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands. $2.4 million. Moss closed the bag. He looked around at the empty desert. The silence was deafening. The wind whistled through the rocks, sounding like a low moan. He knew he should leave it. He knew it was poison. He knew that money like this didn't belong to nobody. It belonged to the devil. And the devil always came to collect. But Llewellyn Moss was a welder who lived in a trailer. He had a wife, Carla Jean, who worked at Walmart. He had bills. He had a truck that needed a transmission. He slung the heavy satchel over his shoulder. "I'm gonna regret this," he told the dead man. He walked back down to the trucks. The dying Mexican looked at him with pleading eyes. "Agua." "I told you I ain't got none," Moss said, hardening his heart. "I'll bring you some. Later." He lied. He knew he wasn't coming back. Or at least, he tried to convince himself of that. He hiked back to his truck. He hid the satchel under the seat. He drove home, the sun setting behind him, painting the sky in violent shades of purple and bruised black. He got home to the trailer. Carla Jean was cooking dinner. The smell of frying potatoes and onions should have been comforting, but it made his stomach turn. "You catch anything?" she asked, not looking up. "No," Moss said. He went to the fridge and grabbed a beer. He drank it in one long pull. "Saw some, too far off." He couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, listening to the AC rattle. He kept seeing the Mexican's eyes. Agua. He was a hard man, but he wasn't cruel. And that was his mistake. That sliver of conscience. At 2 a.m, he got up. He filled a gallon jug with water. He grabbed his pistol. "What are you doing?" Carla Jean asked, sleepy and confused. "I'm going to do something dumb," Moss said. "If I don't come back, tell my mother I love her." "Your mother's dead, Llewellyn." "Well, then I'll tell her myself." He drove back into the darkness, back to the caldera, back to the dead men. But the desert had changed in the dark. It wasn't empty anymore. He parked the truck at the top of the ridge. He hiked down with the water jug. The moon was a sliver of bone in the sky, offering no light. He reached the trucks. The dying man was gone. Dead? Moved? Then he saw it. The window of the truck he had looked in earlier. The one with the headless driver. Someone had covered it with cardboard. Moss froze. The hair on his arms stood up. They're here. Headlights flared on the ridge above him. A spotlight swept the basin, cutting through the dark like a lightsaber. Moss dropped the jug. He ran. He dove behind the rocks just as the first bullets kicked up dust around his boots. Crack thump. Crack thump. High-powered rifles. He scrambled through the brush, the thorns tearing at his clothes. He heard the roar of an engine. A truck was coming down the incline, bouncing over the rocks, hunting him.
He reached the river, the Rio Grande. He didn't hesitate. He plunged into the black water. It was cold, fast. He swam, the current pulling at him, trying to drag him under. Bullets hit the water around him, zip, 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 like angry hornets. He made the other bank, Mexico. He crawled into the cane, gasping for air, shivering. He had lost his truck. He had lost his rifle. But he still had the money back at the trailer. And now, the hunt was on. Sheriff Ed Tom Bell sat at his desk, staring at a newspaper from 1950. He was an old man now, feeling older every day. He poured a cup of coffee that tasted like battery acid. "Loretta," he said to the empty room, "I think the world's going to hell in a handbasket." He got the call about the dead body on the highway, the old man with the hole in his head. Then the call about the deputy. He drove to the station. He looked at Lamar lying on the floor. He looked at the scuff marks on the linoleum. "He didn't even have a gun," Bell whispered. "This wasn't a man, Lamar. This was something else." He drove out to the highway. He saw the dead motorist. He saw the perfect round hole in the forehead. No exit wound, no bullet. "What kind of weapon does that?" the medical examiner asked. "I don't know," Bell said. He took off his hat and wiped his forehead. "But I got a feeling we're going to see it again." He looked out at the horizon. A storm was coming. Not rain, something worse. A storm of blood.
And he knew, with the weary certainty of a man who has seen too much, that he wasn't ready for it. "I sent a boy to the gas chamber once," Bell thought. 19 years old. Killed a girl just to see her die. Told me he'd do it again if he had the chance. Said he knew he was going to hell, and he'd be there waiting for me. Bell put his hat back on. I'm beginning to think he was right. Llewellyn Moss stood in the kitchen of his double-wide trailer. The silence of the morning was heavy, broken only by the ticking of the stove clock. He looked at Carla Jean. She was small, standing there in her nightgown, her hair messed from sleep. She looked too young for this, too innocent. "Pack your bags," Moss said. His voice was flat, no room for argument. "We're leaving." "Leaving? Llewellyn, you ain't even had breakfast. Where we going?" "Not we. You. You're going to Odessa, to your mother's." "My mother hates you, Llewellyn." "Well, then she'll be happy to see you without me." He grabbed a duffel bag and started throwing clothes in. He didn't fold them, he just shoved. "I got into something, Carla Jean. Something bad. And I need you gone. I need you safe." She looked at him, her eyes widening. She saw the gun on the table. She saw the tension in his jaw, tight as a trap spring. She didn't ask what he did. She just nodded. At the bus station, the air smelled of diesel fumes and stale urine. Moss handed her a roll of cash. "Don't you tell nobody where you are, not even your sister. You just go to Odessa and you stay put. If I don't call you in a few days, well, you just keep waiting." He kissed her. It was a hard, desperate kiss. "I ain't gonna hurt no one," she whispered. "I know," Moss said. "That's why you gotta go." He watched the bus pull away,
a silver whale swallowing the only good thing in his life. Then he turned and walked back to the cab he had called. He had a satchel to retrieve and a ghost to outrun. Anton Chigurh stood on the bridge over the Rio Grande.
The sun was setting, bleeding crimson into the water below. In his hand he held a small black box, a receiver. It had a dial and a needle, and right now the needle was twitching. Ping, ping, ping. A rhythmic, electronic heartbeat. It was faint, but it was there. The transponder. It was hidden deep inside the money, a little piece of technology that turned a needle in a haystack into a beacon. Chigurh watched the needle jump. He adjusted the dial. The signal was coming from the north, moving. He got into his stolen car. He placed the receiver on the dashboard. He didn't speed. He didn't weave through traffic. He drove with the terrifying patience of a glacier. He wasn't chasing the money. He was arriving at it. The road stretched out before him, a dark ribbon leading into the heart of Texas. He passed a billboard for Jesus. He passed a dead armadillo on the shoulder. He didn't blink. The needle pinged, stronger now, closer. Moss checked into the Trail Motel in Del Rio, room 138. It was a dump, the kind of place where the carpet was sticky and the mirrors were cracked. But it was anonymous. He threw the satchel on the bed. He stared at it. $2.4 million. It looked like freedom. It felt like an anchor. He went to the window and peered through the blinds. The parking lot was empty save for a few rusted pickups. He needed to be smart. He needed to be invisible. He went to the hardware store. He bought duct tape, wire cutters, and a set of tent poles. Back in the room, he went to work. He unscrewed the vent cover of the air conditioning duct. It was filthy, caked with years of dust and dead bugs. He peered inside. A long, dark metal throat. He rigged the satchel to the tent poles. He slid it deep into the duct, pushing it back until it was invisible from the grate. Then he screwed the cover back on. He wiped his fingerprints off the screws. He wiped the table. He wiped the door handle. He was a ghost. He didn't stay in the room. He rented another one, room 112, across the courtyard. A vantage point. He sat in the dark, watching the door to 138. Waiting. He had the shotgun across his lap, sawed off, ugly and efficient. He waited for the night to come. The night came, and with it, the hunter. Chigurh's car rolled into the parking lot. The receiver was screaming now, a steady, high-pitched whine. He parked. He picked up the cattle gun. He picked up a shotgun with a silencer, a large, bulbous can screwed onto the barrel. He walked toward the row of rooms. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a man delivering bad news. He stopped in front of room 138. The signal was coming from inside. He put his ear to the door. Silence. Just the hum of the AC. He stepped back. He raised the cattle gun. He placed the nozzle against the keyhole. There was no hesitation, no dramatic pause, just the mechanics of entry. Pfft. The sound was a sharp exhale. The lock cylinder didn't just break, it was obliterated. It shot out of the doorframe and punched into the far wall with the velocity of a bullet. The door swung open. Chigurh stepped in, the silenced shotgun raised. He swept the room, bathroom, closet,
Under the bed, empty. He lowered the gun. He looked at the unmade bed. He looked at the vent. He walked over to it. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a coin. He unscrewed the screws with the edge of the dime. He took the cover off. He shone a light inside. Drag marks in the dust, but no satchel. The tracks led deeper. He stood up. He looked around the room. He realized then that the prey was smarter than the average animal. The prey had moved. Chigurh turned slowly. He walked to the window. He parted the blinds with one finger. He looked out across the courtyard. He scanned the dark windows of the other rooms. He didn't know which one, but he knew Moss was there. He could feel it. The game had just become interesting.
Across the lot, in room 112, Moss watched the shadow move behind the blinds of 138. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He saw the light of a flashlight cut through the darkness. He saw the door open. He saw the silhouette step out. The man was tall. He carried something long in his hand. A shotgun. Moss gripped his own weapon. His palms were sweating. He knew he should shoot. He should shatter the glass and put a slug in the man's chest right now. But he hesitated. And in that second of hesitation, the man turned. He looked straight at room 112. Even in the dark, Moss felt the weight of that gaze. It was cold. It was heavy. It was the gaze of a man who didn't believe in luck, only in fate. Moss ducked below the windowsill. "Damn," he whispered. "Damn, damn, damn." He crawled to the back window. He opened it. He squeezed through, dropping into the alleyway behind the motel. He ran. He ran without looking back, leaving the money, leaving the trap, running into the black Texas night with the devil breathing down his neck. Llewellyn Moss didn't stop running until his lungs burned like they were filled with broken glass. He hitched a ride with a truck driver hauling feed, a man who didn't ask questions and smelled of stale coffee and loneliness. Moss sat in the passenger seat, watching the highway markers flash by, counting them like rosary beads. 1 mile further from death. 2 miles. But the feeling didn't go away. It was an itch in the center of his back, right between the shoulder blades. The sensation of being watched, of being hunted. He got off in Eagle Pass. It was another border town, another collection of dust and desperation baking under the sun. He checked into another motel, the Hotel Eagle. It was older, taller, a brick building that smelled of floor wax and secrets. He requested a room on the second floor. Corner room, fire escape access. He was thinking like a soldier again. He sat on the bed. The satchel was heavy on his lap. He stared at it. Why? The question hammered in his brain. How did he know? How did he find the motel in Del Rio? Moss wasn't stupid. He hadn't made calls. He hadn't used credit cards. He had been a ghost. And yet, the Ghostbuster had walked right up to his door. He looked at the leather of the bag. Expensive leather. He ran his hand over it. He opened the straps. The money was there, staring back at him. 2.4 million reasons to die. He started taking the bundles out, stacking them on the bedspread, one by one. He felt them. He weighed them. And then he found it. It wasn't in the middle. It was in a bundle near the center, hollowed out. A transponder.
a sending unit. It was small, sleek, blinking with a tiny, malevolent red light. Moss held it in his hand. It felt cold. He looked at it, and he felt a wave of nausea so strong he almost retched. He had been carrying his own death warrant. He had been sleeping with it, driving with it, running with it. "You stupid son of a bitch," he whispered to himself. "You sheer, unadulterated fool." He didn't destroy it. That was his second mistake, or maybe his third. He set it on the nightstand. He looked at it like it was a venomous spider. If he destroyed it, the signal would stop. The hunter would know he had been found. But if he left it, maybe, just maybe, he could set a trap. He racked the slide of his .45. He checked the shotgun. He sat in the armchair facing the door, the lights off, the street lamps casting long, jagged shadows across the floor. He waited. Time in a motel room when you are waiting to kill a man is a strange thing. It stretches and compresses. The dripping of the faucet sounds like a drum. The passing cars sound like tanks. Moss waited. He listened to the hotel breathe. He heard a couple arguing in the room above. He heard the ice machine rattle down the hall. And then he heard the footsteps. They were different.
They weren't the heavy, tired steps of a traveler. They were soft, deliberate. The steps of a predator who doesn't want to spook the herd. They stopped outside his door. Moss raised the shotgun. His heart was a jackhammer, but his hands were steady rock. He saw the shadow under the door. It blocked the light from the hallway. Then the shadow moved. The doorknob turned. Slowly. Locked. Moss tightened his finger on the trigger. He expected the lock to explode like it had in Del Rio. He braced for the sound of the cattle gun. But nothing happened. The shadow moved away. Moss frowned. Was he leaving? Or was he repositioning? Then he realized. The transom. The window above the door. He looked up just as the glass shattered. A canister, gas, smoke, something, hissed into the room. Moss didn't wait to see what it was. He fired. Kaboom! The shotgun roared in the confined space, blowing the door off its hinges. Splinters and drywall sprayed like shrapnel. Moss racked the slide and fired again. He dove for the window. He didn't bother opening it. He went through it, glass and wood frame exploding outward, his body hitting the metal grating of the fire escape with a bone-jarring crash. He was up in a second. He scrambled down the metal stairs, the cool night air hitting his face. Above him, a figure stepped onto the landing. Anton Chigurh. The silhouette was terrifying. Black coat, that strange haircut, a shotgun with a silencer that looked like a cannon. Chigurh fired. Thwoomp. The silencer turned the roar into a heavy cough. The buckshot hit the railing next to Moss's head, sparking like a grinder. Moss returned fire with his pistol. Bang, bang, bang. The shots echoed off the brick alleyway. He saw Chigurh flinch. He saw the killer stumble back. Moss jumped the last few feet to the ground. He landed hard, rolling to absorb the impact, coming up with his gun leveled. He ran into the street. It was late, but not deserted. A truck was idling at the light. Moss ran past it. He felt a sudden, searing heat in his side, like someone had pressed a branding iron against his ribs. He stumbled, Almost dropped the satchel, but kept running. He had been hit. He didn't know how bad. He just knew that if he stopped, he died. He ducked behind a parked car. He looked back. Chigurh was in the street now. He was limping. He had been hit too. The monster bled. That was good to know. But the monster was still coming. Chigurh raised his shotgun. He didn't care about the witnesses. He didn't care about the cars. He fired. The windshield of the car Moss was hiding behind shattered, showering him with safety glass. Moss popped up and fired his last 2 rounds. He saw Chigurh drop to one knee. Moss turned and sprinted. He ran toward the river, toward the border. He could smell the water now, the Rio Grande, the line between life and death. He threw the empty pistol into the bushes. He clutched the satchel to his chest. His side was wet, sticky. He looked down. His shirt was black with blood. He was losing a lot of it. The world started to tilt. The lights of the border bridge blurred into streaks of neon. He stumbled onto the grass near the riverbank. He couldn't swim it. Not this time. Not with a hole in him. He saw 3 men standing by the bridge. Young guys, drinking beer. "Hey," Moss wheezed. "Help me." They looked at him. They looked at the blood. They looked at the bag. They didn't move. Moss reached into his pocket. He pulled out a wad of bloody bills. "Here," he gasped. "Take it. Help me across." One of the boys took the money. "You drunk, man?" "Shot," Moss said. "Just get me across." They grabbed him under the arms. They dragged him across the pedestrian bridge. Moss's feet dragged on the concrete. He looked back. The American side was dark, silent, but he knew Chigurh was there, watching, waiting. They dumped him on the Mexican side, in the dirt. Next to a sleeping stray dog that lifted its head and sniffed the metallic scent of his blood. Moss lay there, looking up at the stars. They seemed very far away, cold and indifferent. He closed his eyes. He listened to the distant sound of mariachi music coming from a cantina. It sounded like a funeral dirge. He wondered if Carla Jean was safe. He wondered if he would ever see the sun rise again. And then the darkness took him. Not the darkness of death, but the darkness of the void, waiting to see if he was strong enough to crawl back out. Anton Chigurh sat in his room. He had broken into a pharmacy earlier, stealing antibiotics, painkillers, and surgical tubing. He sat on the edge of the bed, his pants down. The wound in his leg was ugly. A chunk of meat was missing from his thigh. Buckshot. It was deep. Most men would be in shock. Most men would be screaming. Chigurh was focused. He looked at the wound with the detachment of a mechanic looking at a broken carburetor. He cleaned it with alcohol. He didn't wince. He took a pair of forceps. He dug into the muscle. He fished out the lead pellets. Clink, clink. They dropped into a glass of water, turning the water pink. He wrapped the wound tight. He injected himself with penicillin. He swallowed 4 Vicodin. He stood up. He tested the leg. It held. It hurt, but pain was just information. It was just the body telling the brain that damage had occurred. He ignored it. He picked up the phone. He dialed a number. Not the police. Not a doctor. He dialed the number of the man who had hired him. The man in the high-rise office in Houston who thought he could control a force of nature. "He's in Mexico,"
Chigurh said. His voice was calm. "He doesn't have the receiver anymore. But I know where he's going." "Do you have the money?" the voice on the other end asked. "Not yet," Chigurh said. "But the money is the easy part."
"The hard part is teaching you people a lesson." "What lesson?" "That you can't bargain with the inevitable." Chigurh hung up. He looked at the transponder he had recovered from the sidewalk where Moss had dropped it. No, Moss still had the money. Chigurh had found the receiver. The signal was gone. Moss had found the bug. Smart. Very smart. Chigurh respected that. It made the hunt pure again. It wasn't about the machine anymore. It was about the mind. He packed his bag. He needed a new car. He needed to cross the border. The rules had changed, but the game remained the same. And Anton Chigurh never lost. Carson Wells was a man who knew things. He was a fixer, a cleaner. He wore expensive suits and had a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He had been hired to clean up Chigurh's mess. He walked into the hospital room in Mexico where Llewellyn Moss lay handcuffed to the bed. The federales were guarding the door, but Wells had money. Money opens doors in Mexico faster than a key. He pulled up a chair. He looked at Moss. Moss looked bad, pale, sweaty. "You've seen him, haven't you?" Wells asked. He popped a piece of gum into his mouth. "Seen who?" Moss croaked. "Anton Chigurh, the man with the bowl cut. The man who kills people with a cattle gun." Moss stared at the ceiling. "Yeah, I seen him." "You can't beat him," Wells said pleasantly. "You're a tough guy, Moss. I can see that. Vietnam, right? But Anton, he's not like you. He's not like me. He's a psychopathic killer, but he's got principles. Strange principles, but he sticks to them." "I gave him a run for his money," Moss said. "You did," Wells admitted. "You put him in a hole. That's more than anyone else has ever done. But he's coming. He's coming for the money, and he's coming for you. And he won't stop, ever, unless you give me the money." "Why should I give it to you?" "Because I can protect you. I can make a deal. Anton, you can't make a deal with him." "Even if you gave him the money now, he'd still kill you, just for inconveniencing him." Wells stood up. He left a card on the bedside table. "Call me when you're ready to live." He walked out. Moss looked at the card. He looked at the IV drip. He thought about Carla Jean. He thought about the man with the dead eyes. And for the first time since finding the satchel, Llewellyn Moss felt true fear. Not the adrenaline fear of the gunfight, but the cold, creeping dread of knowing that he had stepped into a world where the old rules of courage and grit didn't apply anymore. He was in a country where the old men couldn't protect him. Carson Wells returned to the Hotel Eagle Pass. He didn't like this job anymore. He smelled the ozone of bad luck in the air. He walked up the stairs to his room, loosening his tie. He wanted a shower. He wanted a drink. He wanted to be back in a world that made sense. He opened the door. The room was dark, but not empty. He felt it immediately, the displacement of air, the scent of another man. He reached for his gun, but he knew it was too late. He saw the silhouette sitting in the armchair by the window, the same silhouette Moss had seen. Anton Chigurh. Chigurh had the shotgun resting across his lap. He looked like he belonged there, like he was part of the furniture. "Hello, Carson," Chigurh said. His voice was devoid of malice, devoid of warmth. It was just a sound. Wells froze. He didn't draw his weapon. He knew the physics of the situation. Chigurh had the drop on him. "You don't have to do this, Anton," Wells said, trying to keep his voice steady. He walked slowly into the room, hands visible. "I'm just the middleman." "We're all middlemen, Carson," Chigurh said. "Some of us just have shorter contracts." "I can get you the money," Wells offered. "Moss is in the hospital. I know where he is." "I know where he is, too," Chigurh said. "I don't need you for that." Wells sat on the edge of the bed. He looked at the killer. "You have no idea how crazy you are, do you?" "You mean the nature of this conversation?" Chigurh asked. "I mean the nature of you." Chigurh smiled. It was a terrifying expression, like a crack in a porcelain mask. "If the rule you followed brought you to this," Chigurh said, "of what use was the rule?" Wells opened his mouth to answer, to beg, to bargain. But Chigurh raised the shotgun. There was no fanfare, no final words, just the thwump of the silenced barrel and the sudden, violent end of Carson Wells. The phone rang. It was a shrill, demanding sound in the blood-spattered room. Chigurh looked at the body of Wells, slumped on the floor like a discarded marionette. He looked at the phone. He let it ring 3 times. Then he picked it up. "Hello?" Llewellyn Moss was on the other end, calling from the hospital payphone. He had made his decision. "Let me talk to Wells," Moss said. His voice was weak, but hard. "Wells is not available," Chigurh said. "Then you tell him I'm coming," Moss said. "I'm coming to get my money." "You're not coming anywhere," Chigurh said. "You're in a hospital in Mexico, and you're hurt." Moss went cold. The voice. It was the voice of the man on the landing. "Who is this?" "You know who it is." "Where's Wells?" "Wells is dead." The silence stretched over the line, heavy and suffocating. "I'm going to make you a deal," Chigurh said. "A deal?" Moss laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. "You don't make deals." "I'm making one now. You bring me the money, and I'll let her go." "Let who go?" "Your wife, Carla Jean." Moss gripped the receiver until his knuckles turned white. "You leave her out of this. She ain't got nothing to do with this." "Everything has to do with everything," Chigurh said. "You know where I'm going. You know what I'm going to do. Bring me the money and I'll kill you, but I'll let her live. If you don't, I'll kill you both." "I'm going to kill you," Moss whispered. "I'm going to find you, and I'm going to kill you." "No," Chigurh said, "you're not. You're already dead, Llewellyn. You just don't know it yet." The line went dead. Moss slammed the phone down. He stood there, swaying slightly, the hospital gown flimsy against his skin. Panic was a cold hand squeezing his heart. He dialed again. Odessa, his mother-in-law's house. "Hello?" It was Carla Jean. "Carla Jean," Moss said, his voice cracking. "Listen to me. You got to leave. Now." "Llewellyn? What's wrong? You sound awful." "There's no time. That man, He knows where you are, or he will soon. You get your mama and you get on a bus. Meet me in El Paso, the motel by the airport. You understand?" "El Paso? Llewellyn, I can't just—" "Do it!" he screamed. "If you want to live, you do it!" He hung up. He looked around the hospital. He needed clothes. He needed a gun. He needed to get back across the border. He was bleeding, he was exhausted, and he was terrified. But he was moving. Carla Jean put the phone down. Her hands were shaking. She looked at her mother, who was watching TV in the next room. She knew Llewellyn was in trouble. Deep trouble. She picked up the phone again. She dialed the number for the Terrell County Sheriff's Office. "Sheriff Bell?" she said when he answered. "This is Carla Jean Moss. Llewellyn, he's in trouble. He's in bad trouble. You got to help him." Ed Tom Bell listened. He closed his eyes. He felt the weight of the years pressing down on him. He had been waiting for this call. "Where is he, Carla Jean?" "He's going to El Paso," she sobbed. "He told me to meet him there." Bell wrote it down. "All right. You stay put. I'm going to get him. I promise." He hung up. He grabbed his hat. He walked out to his cruiser. He knew the odds. He knew the players. And he knew that promises were the hardest things in the world to keep when the devil was dealing the cards. Llewellyn Moss was driving a truck he had bought for cash from a rancher outside of Eagle Pass. He was headed west toward El Paso. The desert was a blur of heat and mesquite, a landscape that didn't care if you lived or died. He saw her standing by the side of the road, a girl, maybe 15, maybe 16. She had a backpack and a thumb stuck out into the hot wind. Moss slowed down. He knew he shouldn't. He knew every stop was a risk. But Llewellyn Moss was a man who couldn't leave a stray dog in the rain, let alone a kid in the desert. He pulled over. "Where are you headed?" he asked. "California," she said. She chewed gum with the rhythmic indifference of youth. "That's a long walk." "I ain't walking. I'm riding." Moss sighed. "Get in." They drove in silence for a while. The girl talked about her stepdad, about how she was going to be a star, about how the world was waiting for her. Moss listened, his eyes scanning the mirrors. He felt old, ancient. This girl, she thought the world was a movie. She didn't know it was a slaughterhouse. "You shouldn't be out here," Moss said. "There's bad people on these roads." "Like you?" she asked, grinning. "Worse than me," Moss said. "A lot worse." He gave her money. He told her to take a bus, but she just laughed. She didn't smell the blood on him. She didn't see the shadow that was following him, stretching out long and dark across the asphalt. They reached El Paso as the sun was going down. The Desert Sands Motel. It was a U-shaped trap of stucco and neon. Moss got a room 114. He told the girl to stay in the truck, but she followed him. She wanted a beer. She wanted to swim in the pool. "Go to your own room," Moss snapped. "Lock the door. Don't open it for nobody." He went into 114. He threw the satchel on the bed. He was exhausted. His side was throbbing with a dull, heavy pulse. He sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. He was so close. Carla Jean was coming. He could end this. He just needed a few hours of sleep. Just a few hours. He didn't hear the truck pull up. A dark Suburban, filled with men who didn't smile. Mexicans. The cartel. They had tracked the phone call. They had tracked Carla Jean's mother. They didn't need a transponder. They had the oldest technology in the world. Leverage. They got out of the truck. They carried Tech-9s and sawed-off shotguns. They didn't sneak. They didn't care about noise. They were the storm. Moss heard the first shot. It was outside. A sharp crack that ended the girl's dreams of California forever. He grabbed his gun. He stood up. But it was too late. The door to room 114 didn't just open, it disintegrated. Bullets chewed through the wood, the drywall, the glass. Moss fired back. He hit one man in the throat, watching him spray blood across the cheap wallpaper. But there were too many of them. He felt the bullets hit him. Not like in the movies, no slow motion, just the brutal, physical impact of lead smashing bone and organ. He fell back onto the bed. He looked at the ceiling fan spinning lazily above him. Whir, whir, whir. He thought about Carla Jean. He thought about the water he didn't give the dying man. And then Llewellyn Moss stopped thinking forever. Sheriff Ed Tom Bell arrived an hour later. The police lights were painting the motel walls in strobing red and blue, a carnival of death. Bell got out of his cruiser. He put his hat on. He walked past the yellow tape. He saw the body of the girl in the parking lot. She looked like a discarded doll. He walked toward room 114. The smell hit him. Gunpowder, blood, bowels. The holy trinity of violence. He stepped over the shattered doorframe. He saw Moss. Llewellyn was lying on the floor now, pulled off the bed. His chest was a ruin. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. Bell took off his hat. He felt a wave of sadness so deep it almost buckled his knees. He had promised Carla Jean. He had promised. "I'm sorry, son," Bell whispered. "I'm so sorry." He looked around the room. The vent cover was unscrewed. The satchel was gone. The Mexicans had taken it? No. The Mexicans were dead in the doorway, or fled. But the money wasn't there. Later that night, the crime scene was quiet. The bodies had been moved. The tape fluttered in the wind. But the devil wasn't done. Anton Chigurh pulled into the parking lot. He drove a clean car. He wore clean clothes. He didn't look like a man who had been in a gunfight a few days ago. He looked like a ghost returning to haunt a house. He walked past the police tape. He didn't care. He walked into room 114. He looked at the chalk outline where Moss had lain. He looked at the bloodstains on the carpet. He didn't feel triumph. He didn't feel pity. He felt only the satisfaction of gravity. Things fall. People die. He looked at the vent. The Mexicans hadn't taken the money. They didn't know about the vent. They had killed Moss and fled when the sirens came. Chigurh reached into his pocket. He pulled out the dime. He unscrewed the vent cover again. He reached in. He felt the leather handle. He pulled. The satchel slid out, heavy and silent. The money. It was always about the money. And yet, for Chigurh, it was never about the money. He slung the bag over his shoulder. He walked out of the room. He walked past the empty pool where the dead girl's beer can still sat on a table. He got into his car and drove away. Carla Jean arrived in El Paso the next morning. She called the sheriff's station. Bell answered. "Sheriff, is he there? Can I talk to him?" Bell held the receiver. He looked out the window at the dusty Texas street. He tried to find the words. There were no words. "Carla Jean," he said, his voice breaking, "you need to go home. You need to go home and be with your mother." "No," she whispered. "No, Sheriff. You promised." "I know," Bell said. "I know I did." A few days later, or maybe a week, time didn't matter anymore, Chigurh sat in a nice house in Odessa. He sat in the living room. It was dark. He waited. He heard a key in the lock. Carla Jean came in. She looked tired. She was wearing black. She had just come from burying her husband. She turned on the light, and she gasped. Chigurh was sitting in the corner. He looked at her. "I gave your husband a choice," he said. "He chose this." Carla Jean didn't scream. She didn't run. She just stood there, clutching her purse. "You don't have to do this," she said. "I ain't got the money. I don't know nothing about no money." "This isn't about the money," Chigurh said. "I promised him. I told him if he didn't give me the money, I would kill you. He didn't give me the money." "He's dead," she said. "You killed him." "I did, but a promise is a promise." He reached into his pocket. He pulled out a coin, a silver quarter. He placed it on his thumb. "Call it," he said. Carla Jean looked at the coin. She looked at him. She saw the emptiness in his eyes, the total lack of humanity. "No," she said. "I ain't gonna call it." "Call it," Chigurh repeated. "The coin didn't have no say," she said. "It's just you." Chigurh looked at her. He seemed puzzled. "The coin got here the same way I did," he said. "It's been traveling 22 years to get here, and now it's here. And it's either heads or tails, and you have to call it." "No," she whispered. "I ain't gonna do it." Chigurh looked at her for a long moment. Then he put the coin back in his pocket. "I got here the same way the coin did," he said softly. He stood up. The screen fades to black, but the darkness has a sound. It is the sound of a silenced shotgun coughing once in a quiet suburban house. Chigurh walked out of the house. He checked the soles of his boots for blood. Clean. He walked to his car. He was done. The circle was closed. He started the engine. He drove down the residential street. He was obeying the speed limit. He was watching the children playing on the lawns. He was a part of the world again. He approached an intersection. The light was green. He proceeded. He didn't see the station wagon running the red light. He didn't see it until it was too late. Crash! The world turned into spinning metal and shattering glass. Chigurh's car was T-boned. It spun across the lawn of a house. Chigurh sat there for a moment, dazed. His arm was broken. Bone stuck out through the skin, white and jagged. He looked at it. He tried to move his fingers. They worked. He pushed the door open. He stumbled out.
2 kids on bicycles were watching him. Their mouths were open. "Mister," one of them said, "you're hurt bad." Chigurh looked at them. "I'm fine," he grunted. "Let me buy your shirt." "What?" "Your shirt. Give it to me." He pulled out a wad of $100 bills, bloody, crumpled bills. "Here, take it." The kid took the money. He took off his shirt. Chigurh took it. He made a sling for his arm. "You tell them," Chigurh said, staring at the kids with his shark eyes. "You tell them I was gone when you got here." He turned and walked away, limping down the street, a broken monster disappearing into the suburbia he had terrorized, leaving the children holding blood money in the sunlight. Sheriff Bell retired. He walked out of the courthouse for the last time. He felt light. He felt heavy. He felt defeated. He went to visit his Uncle Ellis. They sat on the porch, drinking coffee. "You think you can stop what's coming?" Ellis asked. "It ain't all waiting on you. That's vanity." Bell nodded. "I always thought when I got older, God would sort of come into my life. He didn't." "Don't blame God," Ellis said. "He's got a lot on his mind." That night, Bell dreamed. He woke up and told Loretta about it. "I had 2 dreams about my father," he said. "In the first one, I lost some money he gave me. But the second one, it was like we was both back in older times, and I was on horseback going through the mountains of a night, going through this pass in the mountains. It was cold, and there was snow on the ground, and he rode past me and kept on going."
Never said nothing going by. He just rode on past, and he had his blanket wrapped around him and his head down. And when he rode past, I seen he was carrying fire in a horn, the way people used to do, and I could see the horn from the light inside of it, about the color of the moon. And in the dream, I knew that he was going on ahead, and he was fixing to make a fire somewhere out there in all that dark and all that cold. And I knew that whenever I got there, he would be there. And then I woke up. The screen goes black, the wind howls, and the story ends not with a bang, but with a whisper in the dark.